I think a learning for me here is to make sure you've fallen in love with the right problem. And that means, does it matter to your business? Does it matter to your customers? How do you quantify how much it matters? How do you measure how much it matters? How are you going to know if you're being successful? I think if you can't answer these kinds of questions fundamentally, then I think any transformation project is at serious risk.
So when you think about the overall strategy for the business, I'm sure one of the challenges that you face is some of the skepticism around AI and what's tangible, what's practical, what can it actually deliver. There's even been some stats thrown out there that up to 84% of digital transformation projects fail. What do you see is going to be different this time about AI? What's going to be your strategy to make sure that AI actually delivers for your customers and your colleagues?
I think one of the first sort of learnings, if you will, for me, and that I kind of took from early on in my career, and I think it's so applicable to this area, is a mantra that we repeat within Dojo, particularly with respect to our AI transformation kind of vision, but more broadly as well, which is, I keep telling the teams we need to fall in love with problems, not solutions. And I think whilst that's a fairly intuitive lesson, I think it's one particularly maybe technologists fall foul of in forgetting that. They forget the ends here, and they focus very much, particularly transformation projects that span many years or many months across many teams. You get into the weeds of the means and not the ends. So I think a learning for me here is to make sure you've fallen in love with the right problem, and that means, does it matter to your business? Does it matter to your customers? How do you quantify how much it matters? How do you measure how much it matters? How are you going to know if you're being successful? I think if you can't answer these kinds of questions fundamentally, then I think any transformation project is at serious risk. And so in the case of AI, what we're doing at Dojo, and what I recommend any business do, is really be very intentional and prescriptive about the AI vision mission that they have, and that it is addressing the problem statements that matter to your business, and making sure that you anchor any strategies that you're putting in place to take you towards that vision constantly and regularly against that, to hopefully mitigate the risks that you get distracted away from the problem, focusing on the solution at hand. I think the other sort of big learning, I think, is something that I've touched on a little bit earlier, which is that human change element. You need to make sure that you're bringing people part of, along the journey. You need to educate, you need to make them aware, and that's really at all parts of the business. In the case of AI, we're looking at grassroots communities with our AI champions. You've got the exec group. You've got our early careers. We're doing a huge amount with our AI graduate trailblazer program. So it's covering all levels, all parts of the business. We did a fantastic session. We had a whole day session at the Salesforce AI Innovation Center earlier this year. We had 35 people from Dojo across all different parts of the business, and it was a fantastic opportunity to really boost that evangelism. I think it was, and maybe still is, the largest such event that took place at that center. So we were really pleased with that. But it's engagements like that I think will help keep that energy and that visibility and support and buy-in ultimately.
Okay, so clearly you're on this journey, you're driving that change from being a digital business to an intelligent business. There's a strategy. If you were advising yourself 3 years ago, what would be the critical next steps that you would counsel? So what have you learned on the journey, and what are the must-haves for that transformation?
I think we've talked about data, so I think make sure your data foundations are fully in order. I think businesses, digital native businesses, have gotten very good and almost pat themselves on the back for being very good at collecting data, but it's how can you use that data? Is that data accessible? Is it trustworthy? And so I think really getting that foundational layer correct is paramount. If you want to unlock sort of a coherent view on what your organizational's knowledge base can give and power. The people, we've talked a lot, it's been a recurring theme, so I think you have to engage with the right stakeholders, the broader community, in something as big as this, as profoundly, widely impacting as this. I think you need to be talking about it across the whole company, across those different layers. So making sure that you have an intentional and prescriptive human change strategy in place, I think is huge. And I think pick a specific problem to start with that you want to solve. We talked about falling in love with the problem space. So pick one, make sure it's measurable. I think there's a real temptation with something as widely impacting as this to sort of try and boil the ocean. And so I think really being particular around what does success look like for this initiative, how are you going to explain and demonstrate that to people, and making sure that it is also something that is relevant and matters to your business.
Okay, so it's about getting the data foundations in place, taking the people on the journey, and falling in love with the problem, trying to just pick one thing and solve it brilliantly.
Yeah. Then you can grow it from that, and you got those lessons learned as well around what didn't work.